thank you, Open Oakland, for having us. And shout out to Filsan from CFA to come and watch us. Thank you for being here. So yeah, we are Team Oakland. We are fellows at Code for America in a 9-month program. My name is Adorable. We have Tori on the team and Amee, who will introduce themselves as we continue to present. And so we'll go to the first slide. So we are dealing with, so this presentation is going to be very brief, and it's going to be a pretty high level version. We have other versions of our presentation, but we're going to keep it very high level for this one. We're in this problem where we have unhoused and unsheltered people during a pandemic, which is unimaginable. And for those of us who are privileged to call the Bay Area our home, that's still a lot to contend with, that there are so many people that are unhoused. And so right now there's an estimate that there's about 10,000 people in Alameda County that are living in encampments, cars, unsheltered, unhoused. And within that, we in our research, we found that over half of that population resides in Oakland. And that while Oakland is deeply resourceful, with about 400 to 500 community-based organizations and roughly 1,000 services, people experiencing homelessness still have challenges in accessing clear and accurate information on how to receive resources. So what we're finding is that there's a digital divide in the ability for people to get the resources they need around shelter information, food, and various other housing information that's pertinent to them not staying on the street for as long as we're seeing. Among many local efforts, as I mentioned, we as fellows at Code for America are working with the City of Oakland, their IT department and their Human and Health and Services department to create an opportunity to change that landscape. Next slide. And I'm going to just thank you. And I'm going to pass this on over to Amee.
Hi, my name is Amee Covarrubias, and I'm the Software Engineer Fellow on Team Oakland. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you to our Open Oakland Brigade, what it means to have Oakland style. Our fellowship team's guiding principles are built on the South African Zulu humanist philosophy of Ubuntu, which means I am because you are. Our team believes that the community is built on the foundations of human kindness, and a society is only as strong as its most vulnerable. The reason why we are applying ourselves to this project is because we've collectively experienced food and housing insecurity. Our team recognizes the significance of this project and also the value to unhoused residents in our community during this critical time. In the spirit of Ubuntu, we're creating with sustainability in mind, listening to the needs of our unhoused neighbors with empathy, scaling our application to the capacity of our government partner, and making sure that our project relays accurate and updated information to people experiencing homelessness in Alameda County. And back to you, Adorable.
So the current strategy in providing services across Alameda County is to basically, Alameda is divided into 14 zones. And those 14 zones comprise that number I was talking about of roughly 10,000 people. And each zone is paired with a doctor, a nurse, social workers, frontline workers who are trying to sign people up for brick and mortar services. So there's ways in which trying to get as much resource to each individual within those zones is happening. And our goal is to, as we're in this first quarter of our work, create opportunities for us to get the type of user testing that creates a viable product. So we're right now we're pushing towards our MVP, and we're in our prototype phase, which Tori is going to be demonstrating later. And so right now my job has been primarily around attending CBO meetings, connecting with frontline workers, meeting with them, sharing our prototype, getting feedback. And within that cycle of integration, we're hoping to iterate to the degree that we have our MVP. Once we have our MVP, then going and actually testing with our end user, And some research that we found when working with stakeholders who've built resource apps in the past, one of the antidotes was that he found that actually it was the frontline workers who were utilizing the app more to support people. And so we've been having these conversations to try to gauge the level of technology that's available to people. Some of the stories that we've also found in our interviews were that some of the barriers that we're seeing are people maybe not wanting to leave where they are in their encampments so that their stuff is secured. And so there's technological barriers, there's geographical barriers that have to be taken into place. There's a pandemic, so there's less access to being able to charge their cell phones at a local coffee store. So there's a lot of variables that are impacting, and to the best of our ability, we are trying to address as many things within our power that we could put into an app that would support people. And I guess one more story that I would share is we had one interview with a frontline worker who works at the city of Oakland in the front line, and we shared our prototype. And the feedback that she gave us was that this is something that she could see herself using to support people, and giving us information to help us integrate that into our next iteration. So it's been really promising meeting with people, experts such as yourself as well, and getting that feedback for future iterations. And so I'm gonna pass it on over to Tori to kind of talk about design.
Yeah, thank you, Adorable. So before I show you the prototype, I just want to talk really quickly about, for us, what makes a good design. The number one thing is that it should be accessible to people regardless of what language they speak. As we know, the Bay Area is very diverse. And if you even think of OUSD, they translate all their materials into 5 different languages. So we want to make sure that we are being considerate of what languages people use and make sure that it's reflected in this application. We also want to make sure that it is visually accessible to people who experience colorblindness. We want to make sure, to quote one of my colleagues, that it is fat finger friendly with the buttons, meaning that they are large enough that there are no accidental clicks. Of course, anything that we create should be ADA compliant, but most importantly, it should be easy to use. And so I'm going to walk you through our prototype really quickly. And so when someone first comes into our application, this is when they would have the option to select their language experience. From there, they would be able to either search online using this application, they could call 211 directly and speak to someone, or 211 has a special number that you can use to text to find resources. From there, the user would go through and select specifically what kinds of resources that they're looking for. So for example, let's say if they're looking for shelter, jobs, and specifically if they're looking for any family-based resources, there's additional filters around the number of adults and children, because some shelters have family size limits, or are for families that are over a certain size. And then also asking, is the person escaping a dangerous situation? One of the feedback that we got from frontline workers is that a lot of times people who might be utilizing this app looking for family resources may be victims of domestic violence, but don't want to directly be asked that question for a number of reasons. And so, of course, above all, we want people to feel safe when using our application. People can then also filter by city. And then these 2 questions are optional, but giving people the opportunity to filter further by their age or their gender, because some resources are specific in who they provide services to. From there, the user would get a generated list of results. These are just our imaginary services, and they could view it in this list view or in the map view based on the inputs that they provided. They could further filter by their specific geographic location, but we didn't want to make that a requirement just because for a number of reasons, people don't always feel comfortable giving out their specific location. And then if you were to click on a specific resource, it would just give you more information about it. So the address, which you can navigate to, the phone number, what kind of services they provide, the business hours, a brief, well, it may not be brief, but whatever description that server's provided. And then most importantly, this opportunity for feedback. Something that we're finding is that 211, which is the current provider of most of this information, is only updated about once a year. And as we know from the past 2020, a lot can change in a year. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping up to date with, is the location still current? Are the hours still current? Are the services provided still current? And so that's why we have this kind of opportunity for users to get feedback within our application. Back to our presentation. So how does someone find this? So in an example, let's say that Vicky and her family have recently experienced homelessness. They go to their local food bank looking for a hot meal. When she's there, Vicky asks the worker if they know of any shelters for her and her family. The worker is able to input Vicky and her family's information into the application, and now Vicky knows where she can find shelter and other resources in the future. Amy?
Thank you, Tori. Using our guiding principles, we've come up with the following technical requirements for the City of Oakland Resource Portal. We've created our application in OutSystems, which is a low-code platform used by the City of Oakland's IT department. We're also teaming up with Benetech, who will be our data partner on this project. Their ServiceNet API allows us to integrate 211 data, which is a primary source of information for people experiencing homelessness in Amee County. Their platform also allows for service providers to manage their information on our app. Our resource portal will be a mobile app with PWA, progressive web app distribution capabilities. This allows us to distribute our mobile application via the web or QR code. Also, I wanted to take the opportunity to address one of the questions in the chat, which, why are we using a mobile application? There are tons of different reasons why we actually went with mobile first, and it was a collective decision. And along with offline capabilities, we are living in a special time in COVID, where a lot of public, restaurants, typically public Wi-Fi isn't readily available for people experiencing homelessness. This is the first iteration of multiple iterations that will be ongoing with the City of Oakland. So a web version will be in the works in the future. First, we're going mobile. Finally, our project's database will be a SQL server that's hosted on AWS. And support. Adorable if you want to take it away with your support needs.
Yeah, so our team is very grateful to be here. We know there's a lot of volunteers, there's a lot of talent, there's a lot of experience, and we would love to kind of express like our openness and willingness to receive some wisdom. We are in a fellowship, we're here to learn. We use the agile method in this project, and within that we're wanting to fold in as many different tools and devices that we could possibly fold in so that we could have a really full, robust experience in building out this product. So right now I'm in the process as the PM in wanting to understand more about metrics and data science that I could be utilizing to make data-driven decisions, and wanting to either maybe further up my game with any type of agile methods that I could be using that I'm not aware of. So if anyone is geeked out on agile and data science and would like to just have a conversation with me, that would be great. Anybody else on the team want to share their needs, their requests?
Yes, ma'am. So if you're a data person, I would love to talk to you. More importantly, if you're familiar with Open Referral API, Benetech, the ServiceNet API that we are using to integrate data into our application, is modeled after Open Referral, which a lot of you civic folks are familiar with. So thank you. Tori.
Yeah, and for me, if you have any prototype feedback, if you're a designer, of course, but even if you're not, because obviously a lot of our users are not designers, and there are plenty of I already have plenty of changes in mind, but if you have any suggestions, I'm always open to hearing them. So please, you can Slack message me or you can email me. I'll make sure to put my email in the chat. That's it.
That was awesome. That was like you packed a lot into a small amount of time. That's impressive. Thank you for sharing. We do have a few questions, and I think as we ask them, I suspect more will come in. So I think, and you kind of got to the phone question, the mobile, why a mobile app question. I was wondering if maybe you talk a little bit more about sort of how you're defining your users and why sort of focus on frontline workers versus the actual like people experiencing homelessness directly, or even if that's an either or versus an and.
I could speak a little bit to that and invite the team to share their perspectives as well. Well, you know, we were in a sense commissioned for this project. So there was already an angle of wanting to create a resource app from the city of Oakland. And our effort is in trying to service a bunch of stakeholders. So we have various stakeholders with various needs, but in as best as possible to find the truth in like what is at the pulse of what community needs. From the CFA perspective, we're really being coached in using human-centered design, and it's about trying to locate the space in which we're putting the end user's needs like at the forefront of what we're doing, whether it's in how we're going about connecting with people. For instance, so one of the ways in which we kind of discovered that it would be beneficial to really think about including aspects of how we're engaging with frontline workers is by talking to frontline workers. And it was revealed in our research that is it's a primary vehicle in which a lot of people are getting resourced is through that connection with frontline workers. And so there are a lot of people experiencing mental health issues that might not be lucid to use a phone. So the mental health numbers are pretty high. So there's a, like, when we think about people experiencing homelessness, there's a monolith. There's people who are slightly like maybe couch surfing. Those still constitute under the definition of people experiencing homelessness. So we have like just a large variety of people. And the idea is that the app will service people who are experiencing homelessness, who are various educational levels, just as much as it would a frontline worker trying to help that person. And so Tori actually had another slide with a bunch of different use case, that we have a bunch of different, like a journey map of 5 different ways that we could imagine this one app could direct service to people experiencing homelessness. So I want to leave space for anybody on the team that wants to jump in and share anything else about that.
No, I think you did an amazing job, Adorable. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. All right, so we have a couple questions, Betty and then Ronald.
Awesome. Actually, my question you sort of answered, because I was going to be like, let me make sure I understand this is an app that frontline users are going to work to connect people who are experiencing homelessness to the services that they need. And since you answered that, I just want to give my very underinformed feedback that is amazing. One thing that the Bay Area, which I'm sure you all know, we have a bunch of agencies. I would love for them to work together and coordinate their services. I don't know if you all know, there's 27 different transit agencies in the Bay Area. And I'm like, how is that possible? So when you said there's 400 or 40, I can't remember how many different agencies coordinating their work, seems amazing. And also I'm on the Open Budget Project, and a lot of what's on people's minds, it came up in the community survey that they did, not the one that's circulating now, but one that they did previously, was all around homeless issues or homelessness issues. So this seems like something that's very relevant and top of mind for a lot of citizens here, or residents. So I think just general feedback, this is amazing. Not a question.
Ronald?
Hey everyone, can you hear me? Great. Jess, thank you for reminding me about this presentation. And thank you to the 3 of you for presenting tonight. One of the reasons why I'm thanking Jess is because I work with service providers that provide services for people who are experiencing homelessness. And so I have an eagle's eye view of the entire region, not just Oakland. I'm actually curious about partnerships. So it's similar to Betty's concern. There are so many service providers in Oakland, just specifically. And so what, have you met with everyone home? Are they on board? And then also with regard to creating this MVP, were you in touch with Shelter Tech, which arose from Code for San Francisco, and they created an app that's similar to this one. And then I'll go ahead and pause after this, which is mad props to the three of you for basically using PWA. Because it's going to be extremely helpful for frontline workers who may not have Wi-Fi access. So this is fantastic.
These are great questions, Ronald. Yeah, we've been really blessed that at Code for America and within the networks and the brigades, there's a lot of people doing tech for social good. So we've been able to hear about. We were connected with the website, the Shelter Tech website, and Everyone Home website. We've been able to kind of learn and glean information from Ask Darcel. I have this app called Strapped downloaded onto my phone, which is a resource for teens who are looking for services that has information about Alameda County. So we're really trying to take insights from everyone. We definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel. We also have like 4 to 5 months left of this process. And so it's kind of like, what is something that you could do to get to that MVP? But the fact that these names keep surfacing for us is super helpful to let us know that we're on the path to making something that's in alignment with what other people are doing. And as far as like the service providers, we are in connection with human HSD, Human Services Department, and they have like sitting at their table like about 30 to 40 service providers that they're connected with. Right now, we're in talks to have our first focus group demonstrating, hopefully, if not this prototype, actually MVP in the next 2 weeks. And so we're gearing up to add phase 1 into phase 2, where we can start iterating on even more interesting features that incorporate frontline workers' feedback that we've been wanting to incorporate, but haven't been able to because we're still at the MVP. There's just so much feedback. We're just like, how do we get all of the goodness in such a short amount of time?
And then will you be meeting at the OpenOakland space during our hack nights to work on the project?
We haven't broached that subject yet, but I think the standing invitation is certainly open for us to be a resource. I think I would love to hear from the team, to hear sort of what your working process has been, and sort of, I'd be curious to know where, you mentioned some specific asks towards the end of the presentation, and I'm wondering if there's sort of any kind of logistical or other kind of support we might be able to offer, in addition to sort of trying to funnel in some volunteer skills.
I have a question for Filsan. Filsan, do you think that this could be a joint place for us to invite anybody interested to come to our enrichment, to our mentorship enrichment that we have? Since they're an extension, this is like an extension or in connection to CFA through the Oakland Brigade, right? So technically people on this call could come to that.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea. I think we should connect with Stephen on that, but I'd welcome any and all thoughts and feedback and leadership from this group. And thank you all so much for having me. Jess, if you're open to that as well, I think that's a great idea.
Let's connect after this and follow up on the sort of details of that. And we can also, I'm happy to open a channel in Slack where people can kind of contribute and drop notes. We can kind of pin some documentation, maybe the prototype link and feedback form might be something we can share out. I know that John had a question about the tech stack that Amee kind of answered in chat. I'm wondering if you might talk a little bit about some of the challenges you run into with having to work with these different systems, particularly on the, I know that, you know, working with gov tech can be a struggle sometimes. And how are you, are these platforms that you sort of had to adopt by necessity because that's what you're working with your stakeholders, or did you have flexibility sort of, and what is that, how do you negotiate that?
Thank you for asking. I get really excited about talking about this because I feel like our team is really passionate about having this project live on. And we, first of all, our technical requirements aren't made off, you know, from the top of our heads. We went off of like 100-page, you know, data report from the city of Oakland on homelessness, and not many questions on the digital divide. So we took it upon ourselves to take the time to interview service providers, interview some people experiencing homelessness who are in that space, to try to get a feel of, you know, for example, we, you know, went with mobile and, you know, and with regarding OutSystems, you know, I'm the software developer on the team. I've never worked with OutSystems, and, you know, who has even heard of OutSystems? I haven't. I'm a coder. So our team got together and we listened to the needs of our government partner. We asked a lot of DevOps questions, and they could not support, you know, a React application or something traditional that you would usually see. So instead of watching this project die, you know, we wanted to build with, you know, to this scalability of our government partner. They know OutSystems, so our whole team onboarded, you know, endless hours just so we can get off and running and building this application out. So that's the reason why we chose it. So, yeah.
We have time for a few more questions. I have one in the queue. I'm sort of saving it for the end. I'm going to give folks a chance to weigh in as well. I'm wondering if maybe, you know, you talked about the principle of Ubuntu and the how that informs your design principles. And I'm wondering what that looks like sort of on a decision-making level from day to day. Like, how does that manifest, and how do you kind of make sure that that thread is running through this throughout the process? Because I know that a lot of our teams, I think, you know, we want to be talking to our users and listening with empathy. And what does that, how does that translate in terms of like the decisions you make around tech and the interface and all of it?
Yeah, everybody on the team, I think, is taking the time to integrate that practice and that principle into their work style. So the concept is that that we're thinking about sustainability. For instance, when my style right now during pandemic of reaching out to CBOs is very much with compassion. People are busy, times are kind of tough. And so the process is to like, how many different layers of, I'm thinking about sustainability, I'm thinking about empathy and scalability and having data accuracy and all of these different components, but that also that I'm setting it up so that I'm able to give them a feedback form if they don't have the bandwidth to meet with me via Zoom. And if they can, if we made a video, so we have a video version of our prototype. That's another layer of say someone doesn't have the technical savviness at the CBO to then click through our Figma prototype. So now we have you can watch a video. So we're trying to build in different ways to interact with our process to make it easier for people to get at the information, I'm not hounding CBOs like a salesperson trying to get, like, there's a method of how we're connecting with people and recognizing like the capacity for being able to pour into this project. And so we're moving at the speed of trust with our partners. And someone mentioned earlier, like, you know, we definitely want this app to be tested by end users. And I don't know if I articulated it, but the goal is to build relationships with the people that the CBOs that looked at our first prototype, then get that feedback. When we go back, we say, hey, we're at the MVP. Do you have champions within the community of folks who are out there on the streets that you think might want to look at this MVP? And so what we're doing is, instead of just going out into the world randomly, we're moving through our partnerships to get that extended feedback from their networks. And it just further reinforces the sustainability of our app. And so we're building in these structures of creating that stretch and that infrastructure that there's, at the principle we're trying to build community, even though we're in it at a short amount of time. So that's one example of how we're wanting to incorporate that, the spirit of connecting with people at that level. And I'm pretty sure everyone on the team, from the design to the tech, can explain how they're doing that as well.
Yeah. For me, how it might manifest itself is, for example, it's actually really common that design changes happen, right, in a project. It is a constantly evolving process. Recently, we've been talking with an additional external partner about some user flow changes. And to give it to you the short way, the benefit to those changes is that it's a shorter process. My concern was that sometimes quickness is not convenience. And so always wanting to be mindful of who is our user. And so kind of bringing back to them that about 25% of the people who are experiencing homelessness that we know of are elderly or close to elderly. And so really being mindful that this is something that they can recognize what is supposed to happen here. Because like I said, one of my 5 goals in design is that it's as user-friendly as possible. And if my user might be elderly, then I need to make sure that this is something that they also can recognize and are able to use.
For me, Ubuntu is really meaningful for me as a developer, especially with these technical decisions, and are really, they weren't the first choice for me going into the project with my skills, you know. But we had to put ourselves in the shoes of the community, and that's what brings this passion and, you know, the drive that we have as a team. Everything from every step of the way, we question ourselves or government partners, like as advocates for the community. In all meetings, all technical requirements, we say, wait, let's, you know, do some more interviews. Let's, you know, Adorable can talk to some service providers. I'm developing alongside what they quote unquote Obama phones. So why would people experiencing homelessness have a mobile device? Which there's a government program that hands out mobile phones that are available. That's what we found in our research, that many people experiencing homelessness in Alameda County have these devices that are smartphones. So, you know, I want to see what the performance is like on these smartphones as I'm developing, you know, as location features, you know, finding the user, is that readily accessible to people who use these phones. So for me, it's really personal. And I think there have been times where we, you know, talk with passion with each other, and then, you know, we're advocates first, we're activists first, and technologists second.
Thank you. Those were all really meaningful. I mean, I think this is something we all struggle with as volunteers coming to this work, at least on sort of at the brigade level, and trying to figure out how do you manage those relationships. And that, I mean, building at the speed of trust to me is just like such a beautiful way to put it. I see Cindy has her hand up. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I was just going to ask a little bit beyond that. How do you get your mindset? Have you found that you're bringing your stakeholders on board as well with your mindset and getting them to sort of have that same I don't know what the word is, like the same kind of feeling and energy that you guys have?
Are you asking like how, for example, like as we're having these discussions internally, how are we then relaying it to our external stakeholders so that they have
Yeah, like if they're involved in the decision making, can you sort of bring your mindset to the table, and are you getting a response, a positive response?
So again, to the example of the recent flow change. So our I don't know if you've ever worked with the city before, but they are slow when they don't want something, and then they're really fast when they do want something. And so that's been an interesting process to work with. So sometimes we do have to, in the case of when they're moving a little bit too fast, we do have to kind of like dig our heels in and pull on the reins a little bit and say, you know, like, I need you to think about the user. And then also there are times when, you know, they're dragging their heels a little bit, and then you have to say, you know, I think what's helpful is one, to remind them that this is what they wanted, and that we are just trying to do this in the most in the most equitable and impactful way as possible. And I guess for me, it's as I am, you know, relaying to them my mentality, I'm also connecting it to something that I've heard them say as a core value to them in this project. And that way it's like, it's not just, this is what Tori thinks, this is what we think, you know, this is a collaborative thing, even though I'm really telling you this is what we're going to do. That's
nice work.
One other thing I would just add, Cindy, to the beautiful explanation Tori gave is that we're doing our best to try to be as data driven. And so it's hard. It's like when you come with that data, I feel like it creates a layer of groundedness in our capabilities of delivering what we can deliver, because the data doesn't lie. And so I think that it's coming with compassion and trying to bring that Oakland style as mentioned, but it's also where that meets data. It creates that window of opportunity for us to move the project forward.
Nils, you want to go ahead? And then I have one more in the queue, and then I think we're close to time, but we'll see how we do.
Sure. It's great to hear you guys talk about the users, because I'm a user experience designer as well. And I know how important it is to consider who we're actually trying to serve. But on the other side of your project are all the agencies and how the backlog of cases actually gets served. Like, do you know of other projects that actually work with the various agencies involved and how they prioritize cases and how they find places for people to get put into, shelters for people to access? And just that other side of the whole infrastructure that's there is like a maze too, I know, and is a hard thing for those people to just manage what they're trying to give. And I don't know what that side of the equation, if you guys have dealt with that at all.
Tori mentioned earlier that we've gotten a lot of our data from 211. One story that we heard early on was that at this point, when updating the shelter information on 211 has to call the shelters twice a day, call them and see what the count is for the shelter beds. And so that is the process that is in place right now. And, you know, there's a recognition that our CBOs are working really hard and they're underfunded. I worked at a CBO, I get it. And a lot of them are still using paper to write down resources. If someone leaves that CBO, the institutional knowledge that they have leaves with them. So there some 211 sites that they receive sometimes information on paper, on Excel spreadsheets. There's like various ways in which information is not empirical or uniformed at all. And so the challenge lies in how do we close that digital divide at the CBO level so that there's the opportunity for them to have the most accurate information as possible. And so these are just more observations that we're sharing. I don't know if that answered any of your question around that, but that's kind of these are questions that we're trying to understand and unpack as best as we can as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful, because I've heard about how hard it is to just coordinate the efforts to help people out, and like you said, I know that there's the tech is not nearly as high on that side either. So yeah, it's good to hear that it's a known quantity, and maybe that's something that can be something we could incubate. Who knows?
Okay, so we have one more question left, unless there's anybody else who has something burning they want to ask. Feel free to raise your hand. Sean, do you want to ask your question, or would you like me to?
I can go ahead. Thank you. So again, congratulations on such great work. You have really entrenched yourself in this issue, brought some great insights, and you have certainly excited the city, which is no small feat. So congratulations. I want to ask you a really reflective question now, which is, now that you have been on both sides of the coin, helping the city and trying to figure out how to make these policies even better, what is the future for serving our unhoused our unhoused neighbors? What do you think is the future, and how do you see your project in the path to leading towards that future?
That's a really big question, but I can tell you like kind of my observations so far. What we're noticing within the city of Oakland and countywide is that now more than ever, I would say that they're really making a concentrated effort to tackle the issue of homelessness. We've been we sit on 2 different meetings every week with service providers across the city and then also across the county, where they're updating on, 1, its COVID response, but then 2, the status of homelessness in the county. And so that represents like shelter providers, medical providers, mental health services. And some of the things that they're doing is actually right now they are more aggressively like transitioning people from their encampments into permanent housing. They're in just, I think it was last week's meeting or maybe the week before, but they were talking about several sites that were actually on the brink of closing prior to COVID just because of underfunding have now been refunded. You wouldn't say refunded, but they're being funded again or with more intention from the government, because it is becoming apparent that without proper shelter and medical treatment, unfortunately, homeless people almost become like a vector for virus. And so it's kind of unfortunate that that's what it had to come to for governments to put more money into housing people. But, whatever the motivation, it's helpful that is something that's happening right now. I think also too, this pandemic has provided a unique opportunity for more shelter providers to actively work together and actively collaborate on an ongoing basis. Whereas before, as we all know, Oakland is just like a series of siloed services, and you might have like Betty said, you might have 17 services doing the exact same thing, maybe even on the same block, and they don't even, work together. When I used to work for the food bank, there was a lot of, I think at the time when I worked there were almost 400 different food pantries across Alameda County. And in Oakland alone, there was 118, and most of them weren't even serving at capacity. So, it's a matter of not coordinating efforts in a way that is beneficial to the person who is experiencing homelessness. And so I'm really hopeful and optimistic that even though obviously this pandemic has been a really hard time, I think that if we continue at this rate, I think a lot of really positive change can happen in the long run.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for giving us your time and thoughts. Adorable or Amee, do you have any last words to close us out?
For me, it was great to connect with you all. I think we're all on the same, we have the same mindset as we're here to offer up our skills and our lived experiences help our community, and only as a community we can lift each other up. So feel free to find me on LinkedIn or Slack. We love talking about our project, hashing things out, and especially me as a developer, love doing that. So thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank you so much. This was really amazing.
Yes, this was absolutely fantastic. Thank you all. And I'll end the recording here.